Dr. Pranoy Roy, Raghav Bell, and Ronnie Screwvala. These three men defined a whole era in India's media and entertainment business. They were early movers who started out as India and its media sector opened up. They rode the wave of success and also faced the consequences of being first movers. But with so much changing so fast, are things tougher now? My question is today, three things have happened. First is content has become democratized, Raghav. I mean, anybody can, create a content website, right? Second is, I think technology is the big game changer because, and we are doing a digital startup and, technology is changing in front of you. And the third is that suddenly India is not catching up with anybody. We are there. The world is trying to find what is the next big digital idea, right? Because geographical boundaries have come down in digital. In this environment, how can you be a disruptor? What is it that you can do to really stand out? And, have you thought of this? I mean, because suddenly all of these three pieces are coming together, the rules have changed.
I think in the content business, you can only disrupt by creating better content. We are in the content business. We are not in the technology business. Disruption happens in the technology business. Content businesses are pretty steady businesses. Can you create that better film? If you can, you'll get the audience. Can you create the better news site? If you can, you'll get the audience.
I would not overemphasize this whole democratization of the content part. I think the audience has, and you can form your own viewpoints. But I don't think there's going to be one of those situations where 7 billion people are going to create just what they want to watch and go forward on that.
I mean, I'm saying the 7 billion can create 5,000 content companies. I mean, suddenly you're not the only one playing that game.
No, but I think there's one of the finest thinkers in media I was having a conversation with once, and practicing media guys, not one of those guys who writes books, but like us, but a guy who actually ran big companies. And he said, he said a very good thing. He said, I was talking about this whole thing about explosion and power in everyone's hands. He said, listen, there is going to be private media and there's going to be public media. What you are seeing is an explosion in private media, where people want to share their friends and they want to. Public media will be led by brands.
Yeah, they have to be.
They have to be. So Financial Times is getting stronger. New York Times digital revenues are growing faster. In fact, they overtook them in the revenue mix. Digital overtook newspaper revenues of New York Times last year. The Economist has done brilliantly in digital.
Sure.
So in public media, it will have to be brands.
But you've already created those brands in the news space, in the business news space.
Yeah, but you can always disrupt with better content. That's the disruption I'm talking about.
And there's always been that. Every time we've seen there's something, there's always been 2 new brands that have come in. There won't be 20 new, but there'll be 2, 3, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to finish off that, I think the technology part to me is a means to an end, because it's as Raghav said, that's where the disruption is really. But if you look at most of content telling and storytelling, that'll get to its own level. Technology will break it up in the formats in which you're going to see it, in the mediums in which you're going to see it, what time you can see it, and the luxury of which you're going to see it. But the constant of storytelling will have to remain for a long, long period of time.
So I'm going to ask you, the last couple of years have been tough because I think the industry went through a lot of churn. Your businesses went through a lot of churn and they were difficult times.
There was no business. 2 years ago, there was no business.
There was no business. But what was your big takeaway from that period? Because, when you're down and out, and you've always said, Raghav, and I'm going to quote you there, you said you cannot put a good man down, they will bounce back, And what was your take of what happened and how has that changed you as an entrepreneur?
Well, I've written about that in the book. I've written a foreword which a lot of people have told me is brutally honest. So, but that's fine. The big thing for an entrepreneur when you get away from a company that you founded, for me, was not the loss of the day-to-day activity, but the loss of identity. I think it's the loss of identity. You have to deal with the loss of identity because suddenly you have 6,000 person company, 35 brands, suddenly you have nothing. So to come out of that, I think, is to reestablish your sense of identity. For me, that was the big challenge. The fact that I would stay in the media business for me was a given. I know nothing else. So I was going to, and within the media business, news is the first love. So therefore, one would stay with news. And when Bloomberg came along, we said, wow, this is a chance to redo what we've done.
Ronnie? You were not really down because, you got Walt Disney to kind of come in at the right time and, help you tide over the big bad period. But looking back, how has that changed? It must have been a tough learning, right? I mean, when you saw all of this stress coming together on the balance sheet, etc. So how has that changed you as an entrepreneur in your second round?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's any that kind of learning there. I mean, I think stress in a balance sheet is going to be an ongoing saga for anyone and everyone whenever they're doing whatever they're doing. And there'll always be up years and there'll down years. So I think the context of learning, to me, to be honest, I think my biggest learning has been staying the course. I think the question, and I know it sounds odd because one has exited the business, so what do you mean by staying the course? But if you just look at the thought process, I think part of the reason why we're sitting here and you're even having us here is because we've all stayed the course for 15 to 20 years. Most people do it for 2, 3, 5 years and are either out, do not have the tenacity to whatever else. So I think that's the learning. Now, in that process, you bring in partners, you diversify your team, you diversify your business, you shrink your business, you grow it up again. These are all, that's the journey.
Cycle.
That's the journey, that's the cycle that will always happen. But I think if you want to build successful businesses, then you need to stay the course.
Did you miss the power play that went, obviously?
See, I wasn't in news, so I never felt the power.
No. I mean, Bollywood is hugely powerful as well. I mean,
depends on which side you're at. I've not felt that power there. No. I was always the 99th person on an invitee list.
Nobody believes that, Ronnie. No. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that in this room. But Raghav, did you miss that also?
Of course you do.
Yeah?
Of course you do.
And
you have to build it all over again. It's tough, but there is no other way to be. Because what is the option? The option is a graceful retirement, but that's but that's not an option.
But both of you, in a sense, got off the treadmill, right? You were running very fast. You were ahead of the race in many cases, and you got off the treadmill. And a lot of people have come in. I mean, what ET now has done in the business news space in the last couple of years has been phenomenal as well. So, looking at that little time that you missed out, how much harder will you have to work to get back on the treadmill right now?
No, I think you have to reset your goals. I don't think you can say that I want to now. For instance, I don't think a colors can be done again. I know it will be foolish to try and do it again. Even the television piece is, I think, a difficult piece. But can you learn new rules of the game in media through digital? That's what we've
So
done.
CNBC can't be done again? CNBC TV 18? You don't think so?
No, CNBC TV 18 can be done. That's one channel. That's just one channel. And there also, I'd be very honest, we wouldn't try to create a brand from ground up. That would have been foolish. It's just that Bloomberg was looking for a partner, and so we picked it up. Otherwise, we would have stayed focused in the digital space because that is at least coming at media from a new curveball. It's coming at media from a technology disruptor. So therefore, it gives you the chance to be disruptive in your content. Therefore, we chose digital. And clearly, that's where audiences will be. But I don't underestimate the power of the legacy players. I mean, when you're up against a Times of India or you're up against NDTV, they are such huge audiences on digital that you therefore have to recraft your content offering. But there was no other way to be, honestly.
Ronnie, I mean, you created the whole, you brought in a fresh wave into the movie making business. Now the 100 crore club has become a 500 crore club. It's only getting bigger. And,
but I have to pause there and say, I really don't have a context of that in the last 4 or 5 years, because when I've stepped out, I've really stepped out. So I have to say very honestly and candid. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I think it is, and not with any deep sense of regret, and not in any attitudinal form. It's just that's how it moves. So I guess I don't think I got off the treadmill in different aspects. Physically, also, I think I've lost more weight than I have in the last 5 years, and that's been very hard at this age. But no, I think the context for me wasn't media, and I think to that extent, I have to say, I don't know whether it was easier or more difficult. It was just very different.
One thing that is universal in India is that people don't normally sell businesses. Actually, it's this generation. I think if you were to trace back people who've actually sold businesses and exited, it would be Rajiv Chandrasekhar, it would be Malvinder and Shivinder with Ranbaxy. In the new age media space, it would be all of you. I mean, traditional Indian businessmen will carry a loss and the burden for a long time, and we are seeing that around, right? Is there a double-edged sword also, Raghav? One way to look at it is it's help you reboot and start again. But is it that much more difficult to get investors, to get talent, to get people to buy the story? Because, in a sense, there was a lot of criticism also about, were they mercenaries, were they in it for the money? And Ronnie, that question is coming to you too, because, the whole idea was, did you create platforms to sell, essentially?
No, I can speak for myself, not at all. But circumstances happen. I mean, listen, if you're going to, 2007 was the easiest year to pick up money. Yeah, people were running after you with a check. Literally, Lehman was alive then, was willing to give you $100 million, and they were beseeching you to take $100 million because they wanted some subprime in their portfolio, right? I mean, they wanted to bundle those assets. And I'm being very honest, that was the reality. But then, could anyone see 2008 when the bottom just fell out of the world? And then, so I think, these are, as Ronnie said, these are the cycles you have to ride up and down, up and down. They happen. In good times, all of us take leave of our senses. We all lose the sense of balance. Not only us. I mean, Mr. Ratan Tata bought Chorus and he bought Jaguar, both together in a span of 6 months. And now look at what Chorus has done to Tata Steel.
Sure.
So we were not the only guys who made the mistakes. I think mistakes were made all around. Look at what the African operations have done to Bharti Telecom.
Sure.
Look at how much that has loaded on to Bharti.
But is this a legacy you have to fight off when you are going out in the market, hiring, getting in people? Is there a certain sense of apprehension that you see on the other side?
No. Whether it's investors, partners, talent, I think, inshallah, there's been no problem at all. There's been no problem at all of any sort. In fact, there's been a desire to work
Ronnie?
as well.
Without sounding repetitive, I have to say, I'm saying it's a lovely question to say, you planned it and it was premeditated. But I think anyone who's built a business, run a business, or exit a business knows there's complete fallacy in that thought process. Because the very aspect is, if you really set out to sell a business, what is the business you're building? Okay, are you building it in your vision? Are you building it in what you think is going to be the beholder's vision at X number of years after that? It just will not work. And we faced many slaps, especially I think for 9 months after we sold UTV to Disney, enough people were shooting arrows at us. And I think the first time I experienced that kind is when we divested Hungama, which is a channel that we had started, and 18 months later, it became the #1 channel. And we put out an ad, for a full-page ad in the Economic Times, like we did this time around, saying it was the #1 channel. And then 6 weeks later, we had sold it to the Walt Disney Company. So everyone said, totally pre-planned. And I said, you must be out of your mind, because for the first 6 months, it was disaster. And if I really wanted to build a channel that I wanted to sell to Disney, what would I have built at that particular point? I would have started thinking, okay, Walt Disney wants to buy the channel in 18 months. I would never have put disruptive programs there called Shin-Chan and Doraemon, which till date, parents come and hold me by the neck and say, you're the guys who got Shin-Chan and Doraemon into this country, in that thought process. Second, I wouldn't have called the channel Hungama, because for 30 days afterwards, nobody in Burbank could pronounce the word they would always end there.
But I want to go back to 2007 to 2009. I remember when you were in a flurry of launching niche channels, and Disney picked up a stake and then increased the stake. The valuations went ballistic in those 2 years, and that was largely because of the many channels that you launched at that point. So, I mean, was there a little bit of hubris over there, or some kind of, view of also getting scale very quickly to get valuations up?
No, because I don't think we were in the market to sell Hungama at all.
No, I'm not talking about Hungama.
I'm saying that's the chronological sequence of events. And I think if we did that because we were inheriting a partner, not because we were selling a channel. And I think after that, yes, we had missed the boat on Gel and Entertainment. And in our B2C plan, the entire touch point for consumers was big screen, small screen, and mini screen. That was our vision, the way we want to do that. Animation, gaming, and everything else was on the small screen. And on television, we knew we'd missed the boat on the GEC part.
Sure.
That's why we went in for a multiple of niche channels.
Both of you have been hugely inspiring for a whole generation of entrepreneurs, and not to make you feel old or anything like that. So you're all, raring to go again. My first question is, what is your advice to young entrepreneurs, especially now, because money has suddenly become easy in certain categories, and there's a lot of excess happening, pretty much like 2004, 2007 is happening in technology and pockets of it. What's your advice? And second, in your comeback, what is that one USP going to be? The one USP that you're going to be putting all your might behind?
Oh, the second one's easy, right? The USP, grow with your balance sheet. Don't go beyond your balance sheet.
Yeah.
Hindi में कहते हैं पाँव ज़्यादा मत पसारो चादर से ज़्यादा. So just don't. Stick with your, if I was to just answer that in another way, the fundamental error that I think that I made was to look only at the P&L and not look at the balance sheet. So the balance sheet didn't have the strength. The P&L was doing wonderfully because Colors was taking off, CNN IBM took off, Home Shop 18 took off, all these companies just took off. So we looked at the P&L and said, wow, revenues are coming, but never realized that the balance sheet didn't have the strength to support that. So that's really look hard at the balance sheet every day and not just at the P&L. And the P&L will take care of itself if the balance sheet is strong. As for young entrepreneurs, I see a lot of it happening today, and I see the Economic Times and front pages of don't get seduced by the media. You guys haven't become superstars until you've really created a profitable balance sheet.
Yeah.
You guys haven't. You may think you have. You get all kinds of awards.
Again, people are chasing them with the money.
Yeah.
And what do you do then?
There'll be a crash. Wait and watch, because these are rules of economics. And just if you don't have resilience to take the bad times, just don't become an entrepreneur, because it's not a sexy, glamorous game. It's a very tough. The kind of stresses you have to go through is amazing. Especially if you want to be an honest entrepreneur. If you want to be a guy, if you're a guy who doesn't pay his taxes and all of that, that's different. But if you want to pay your taxes, pay your loans, pay your employees, it's tough.
Okay, Ronnie.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to talk about from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think you've got to build what you want to build and stay constant and very clear about your own vision and what you want to build. And I think today's ecosystem is forcing people to go a little bit horizontal. 9 out of 10 questions that I work with entrepreneurs with, and I'm working genuinely with a lot of them, is, so what do you think the investor wants? And I'm saying, but what do you want to build? What is the company you want to build? What is the business you want to build? That question is very weak, and I think it needs to get much, much stronger.
Sure.
And the second part, I think, is that people are not curious enough. And I think if there was one aspect that works for me a lot is curiosity, because then you're constantly asking questions in whatever else. Your second part of the question, I think, is much more personal. For me, I think the words are impact and fun. And I think whatever I'm doing right now, the benchmark was impact. Kabaddi for me is fun and impact, because we just took something and we really rustled it up, changed the rules on just 2 parts of the game. If you look at that in the entire thought process, the fun of glamorizing our boys to have 30% viewership comes from women in the sport. Cricket is 10% women, 90% men. Kabaddi is 30% women, 70%
Wow.
men. And that's because we took a lot of time to make Anup Kumar look really sexy in that thought process. And if you look at the World Cup, or you look at the Asian Cup where Kabaddi is played, it's quite a boring game, because you're holding your breath, you got to go into the other side, you don't have to score and you come out. So all we did is make a 30-second round, and what we call is a do or die thing, that every third time you have to score, and the whole game economics have changed. And I think 7, 8 of us got together, and I think whatever one is doing in education or in sports, and actually in some of the private equity work that we're doing, is fun and impactful.
Right.
But I think that's the luxury of choice.
Right. On that note, I think it's time to wrap it up. You both had great impact on the industry, on all of us sitting over here, and let's hope that you have great fun in the second innings.
I think that's important.
And
Fun is important.
Fun is important, and really.
But when you have a strong balance sheet, fun is easy.
It comes down to that. Right. And all the very best, Raghav.